November 2nd, 1943. Dawn over Simpson Harbor, Rabaul, New Britain. A low mist clings to the black volcanic water as Japanese lookouts rub sleep from their eyes and scan the mouth of the harbor. Out on the anchorage, the silhouettes of transports and warships lie at anchor like a forest of iron. Marus, cargo vessels, and warships of the Imperial Japanese Navy. On the decks, sailors shuffle in clogs, the smell of diesel and coal smoke drifting in the still air. Above them, against the faint paling sky, a few Mitsubishi A6M0 fighters of the 253rd Kokutai orbit lazily, pilots board, engines droning. From his post on the eastern ridge, Sergeant Kenji Matsuda lifts his binoculars, feeling the dampness in the leather strap against his neck. The harbor below is the lifeblood of Japan's South Pacific defenses: fuel, ammunition, replacement troops for New Guinea. He exhales, watching a wisp of vapor curl in the cold air.
The Americans have hit Rabaul before, with high-altitude bombers and dive-bombing SBD Dauntlesses from carriers. But today, the sky looks empty. Hundreds of kilometers to the southeast, however, the sky is very much alive. A formation of North American B-25 Mitchells from the U.S. 5th Air Force slams through ragged clouds just above the Whitecaps, salt spray flicking up under their bellies. The altimeter needles hover around 50 to 100 feet. These are not the B-25s the Japanese think they know. Their noses are no longer glazed like greenhouse cockpits for bomb aimers. They've been transformed into snarling gun platforms, solid noses crammed with .50 caliber Browning machine guns, with more guns blistered along the sides. In the lead ship, a B-25 of the 345th Bomb Group, the Air Apaches, Major Charles Mac Macaulay grips the control column, jaw tight. The cockpit vibrates with the steady thunder of the twin Wright R2600 engines.
Beside him, his co-pilot, Lieutenant Joe Harkins, thumbs the interphone switch. "Gunners, eyes peeled, we're coming in low, stay sharp," Harkins calls, his voice flattened by the headset. In the right-hand seat, Macaulay glances down past the armored windshield. The sea looks close enough to touch. White wakes streak away from the Mitchell's nacelles. The nose compartment ahead of him is now a cramped gunner's coffin. Private First Class Eddie Nolan lies prone behind the battery of forward-firing Brownings, hands resting on the chattering metal beasts that will soon spit fire at 800 rounds per minute. These are commerce destroyers of the Southwest Pacific, modified at Townsville and other Australian bases under the ruthless ingenuity of Major Paul Poppy Gunn. Where once a bombardier peered through a Norden sight from altitude, now steel and lead take his place. 8 to 12 50 caliber guns point forward, some of them mounted in side pods.
Bomb Bay rocks now carry parafrag clusters and 500-pounders rigged for skip bombing. Target: Rabaul's harbor, shipping and dock facilities. Entry from south, treetop all the way, the briefing officer had said hours earlier, jabbing at a map lit by a single bare bulb. Flak will be heavy. Zeros will be up. You are not sightseeing. Get in, kill ships, get out. In the back of the aircraft, Staff Sergeant Bill Carter, the top turret gunner, kneels in his revolving dome, scanning the pale horizon for specks of enemy fighters. Below him, the waist gunners, their .5s poking from open windows, shuffle on the metal floor, boots clanging. The smell inside the B-25 is a mix of oil, heated aluminum, and tension. As the formation roars on, the coastline of New Britain begins to rise from the sea, dark jungle giving way to the looming bulk of the Gazelle Peninsula. The sun climbs, washing the sky in a harsh tropical glare. Coming up on point of no return, Macaulay mutters.
"After this, boys, we're married to the target." Harkins gives a brief, humorless laugh. Wasn't planning on a divorce anyway. Far ahead, unseen, Rabaul's volcanic peaks brood over Simpson Harbor, a fortress the Japanese consider almost untouchable. Their experience has told them that American bombers mean contrails in bombs falling from miles above, not snarling gunships skimming the wave tops. Back on the eastern ridge, Sergeant Mitsuda lowers his binoculars as a runner arrives, panting. "Radio from command," the boy gasps. "Enemy air expected. B-24s, maybe B-17s, to attack airfields, altitude high." Mitsuda nods and looks up at the empty blue. He's seen heavy bombers before, tiny silver dots against the heavens, flak puffs blooming like black flowers around them. He has not yet seen what a B-25 looks like when it comes in at mast height, gun barrels protruding from its nose like the fangs of a steel tiger. Over the radio in the lead Mitchell, the voice of the mission commander crackles. "All ships, this is Red Leader. We stay low, we stay fast, we go straight through. On my mark, we climb just enough to clear the headland, then we're in the harbor. Remember, ons first, bombs second. We rake them, then we break them." Macaulay feels the muscles in his neck tighten. His thumb hovers near the gun trigger wired into the yoke. "Let's go punch the Emperor in the teeth," he says quietly. The jungle-clad coastline rushes up to meet them.
The shoreline of New Britain leaps beneath the Mitchells in a blur of green. Coconut palms and kunai grass whip past just below the wingtips. The formation snakes through a shallow valley, following the contours of the land to stay masked from Japanese radar and lookouts on the outer coast. In Macaulay's cockpit, the radio crackles with clipped call signs. "Red 2, on your left. Tighten it up, boys. We look like a drunk snake down here," comes the voice of Captain Ray Shorty Henderson from the next element. Macaulay edges the B-25 a fraction higher, just enough to avoid an outcrop covered in jungle. The propellers bite the air mere meters above the treetops. The altimeter needle flirts with disaster. Beyond the last ridge, the land suddenly falls away. Simpson Harbor spreads out like a steel-studded mirror. Dark ships ride at anchor, freighters, transports, and a few gray shapes with sleeker lines, destroyers and light cruisers.
On the piers, ant-like figures scramble in panic as sirens begin to wail. "Jesus," Harkins breathes. "Look at that traffic jam, target rich as it gets." At that moment, in an operations bunker near Lakunai Airfield, a Japanese staff officer stares at a plot-in table as a breathless signaler bursts in. "Report from Coastal Watch, enemy aircraft, low altitude, approaching harbor." The officer frowns. "Low altitude? That must be a mistake. Americans attack from high." He is cut off by the first low, rising thunder as the B-25s crest the last ground and drop toward the harbor like a flight of enraged hornets. In the lead ship, PFC Eddie Nolan presses his cheek against the gun sight glass. Through the nose framing, the harbor swells, individual ships growing from gray smudges to solid hulls. He can see sailors on deck, some pointing, some frozen in shock. "Target's dead ahead," Nolan calls. "Big freighter at 1 o'clock, range closing fast." "Take the one with the cranes," Macaulay replies. "We'll saw her in half." The Mitchell lunges forward as he advances the throttles. Harkins drops the nose, leveling off at barely mast height. The wind howls around the fuselage, the engines hammering. "Guns free," comes the call over the radio net. Nolan's fingers yank the triggers. A dozen streams of fire leap from the B-25's nose, .50 caliber tracers glowing orange-red in the humid air. The sound inside the aircraft becomes a solid, rattling roar as the forward Brownings spew out a river of lead. Empty shell casings clatter and bounce in the nose compartment, a metallic hailstorm at Nolan's elbows. On the harbor, the Japanese freighter's bridge explodes in a shower of glass and splinters. Sailors along the rail jerk and fall as rounds stitch the deck from bow to stern. Wooden lifeboats burst apart, cranes collapse, and fuel drums erupt into orange blossoms of flame. Along the waterfront, anti-aircraft gunners scramble to their Type 96 25mm mounts,
hands shaking as they try to slew the guns down to track the streaking bombers. They're used to leading high-altitude targets, not fighting aircraft that scream past below the level of the dock warehouses. "Too fast! Too low!" one gunner shouts, swinging his weapon wildly. Tracers arc overhead, far behind the Mitchells. A second element of B-25s from the 3rd Attack Group tears in along a different axis, their side-mounted guns chattering as they rake parked aircraft at Tobra and Rapopo airstrips. Parked Zeros and Betty bombers disintegrate under the hail of .50 caliber rounds, wings shredding, fuel tanks erupting. Hangars splitting open under the fire, vomit smoke and flame. Back over the harbor, Macaulay lines up on the freighter they've just savaged. "Bombs," he snaps. "Skip run. Fuse set?" Harkins nods. 1/10 delay. We're good.
The technique is new, born in the Southwest Pacific out of necessity and desperation. Instead of dropping bombs from altitude and trusting to math and luck, the crews bring their B-25s in at wave-top height, release 500-pounders just short of the target, and let them skip across the water like stones before smashing into a hull and detonating inside. Macaulay steadies the Mitchell. The freighter's bow loans ahead, already smoking from the strafing pass. The sea flashes silver beneath the nose. Stand by," Harkins intones, watching the ship's waterline rise in the bomb sight. Now. The B-25 jolts slightly as the bombs drop free. From the cockpit, Macaulay can't see them, but Nolan in the nose catches a glimpse. Dark shapes bouncing once, twice on the surface, leaving V-shaped wakes like angry sharks. On deck, a Japanese petty officer stares, eyes wide, as the bombs hurtle towards his ship. "They are skipping," he shouts, voice breaking.
The first bomb slams into the freighter just below the main deck, punching through the hull plates. For a heart-stopping fraction of a second, nothing happens. Then the delayed fuse does its work. From the side of the freighter, a gout of flame and steel erupts, blasting out plating, cargo, and men in a single monstrous belch. The ship's midsection balloons, then buckles. Black smoke boils upward, tinged red at the base. "Hit! Good hit!" Nolan screams into the interphone, jubilation cracking through the strain. Behind them, more Mitchells hurtle into the inferno of Simpson Harbor. Some come in line abreast, their combined gun batteries turning entire piers into splintered wreckage. Others select individual ships, strafing bridges and gun positions before dropping their skipping bombs with surgeon-like precision. Above the chaos, the first Zeros dive from their patrol orbit, caught off guard by the altitude and speed of the attackers.
They roll into steep dives, 20mm cannons seeking the weaving bombers. In the top turret, Staff Sergeant Carter swivels to meet them. "Bandits at 2 o'clock high," he barks. His twin 50s chatter to life, streaks of tracer reaching for the incoming fighters. Down below, on the ridge, Sergeant Matsuda stands frozen, watching the impossible. American bombers flying lower than many fighters, bristling with guns, ripping the harbor to pieces in a storm of lead and steel. "These are not bombers," he whispers to himself. "These are gunships."
While the smoke over Rabaul curls into the tropical sky, far to the west, another Japanese convoy threads its way along the north coast of New Guinea. The sea is a muted green under overcast skies, the air thick with humidity and the distant scent of jungle rot drifting on the wind. It is early March 1943, and the memory of Rabaul's mauling has not yet filtered through the imperial bureaucracy. On these decks, the officers still read doctrine that calls American medium bombers clumsy, altitude-bound machines. On the bridge of the transport Teumaru, Lieutenant Commander Sato adjusts his binoculars and studies the convoy's formation. Transports loaded with troops for Leh, Thousands of men, bound for the grinding struggle over New Guinea, plod along at a steady 7 knots, hemmed in by destroyers bristling with guns and depth charges. "We are well protected," Sato says, almost convincing himself. "The Americans will send their high bombers, our gunners will be ready." He glances at the Type 96 AA mounts, their barrels elevated toward the clouds. But somewhere beyond the horizon, at an altitude barely clear of the wavetops, the Americans are again rewriting the rules. A mixed force of B-25s from the 5th Air Force's 38th and 3rd bomb groups races over the water, bound for what will be remembered as the Battle of the Bismarck Sea. In their bellies, 500-pound bombs fused for skip attacks. In their noses and sides, batteries of forward-firing 50s ready to scour decks and slaughter gun crews. In the cockpit of one Mitchell, Captain Frank Dutch Holland squints through salt-spattered glass. "Convoy should be dead ahead," he mutters. "Low clouds playing nice today." His navigator, Lieutenant Sam Ortega, traces a finger along the chart on his knees, pencil topping near the projected convoy track. "We're right on the money. Tell the boys in the back to say their prayers."
The radio crackles with orders from the overall mission commander, General George Kenney's men, executing a plan that has been drilled, refined, and rehearsed. B-fighters to strike first, forcing the Japanese to turn broadside. Then the B-25 commerce destroyers to roar in at mast height, guns blazing, bombs skipping. "Remember," the briefing had hammered home, "you are not just dropping bombs, you're killing ships. You press your run until you see the whites of their eyes or their headbands." The Australian Bristol B-fighters strike first, skimming the crusts with their own banks of guns. Their 20mm cannon and machine guns tear into the convoy's bridges and decks, sending splinters, flesh, and steel into the air. Japanese gunners, expecting high-altitude bombs, are suddenly forced to swing their weapons horizontally to fight an enemy that seems determined to fly into their funnels. On the Teo Maru, Lieutenant Commander Sato hears the roar before he sees the attackers. Viewfighters flash past, their cannons punching ragged holes through his ship's superstructure. Men scream and fall. Windows vanish in a shower of shards. The bridge becomes a charnel house. "Hard starboard!" Sato bellows, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. "Present less target." His helmsman, hand shaking, spins the wheel. The ship begins to swing. And that is exactly what the Americans wanted. As the convoy exposes its flanks, Dutch Holland's B-25 breaks through the cloud shadow. "There they are," Ortega says, voice flat. "Whole damned parade." Ships dot the sea, wakes crossing in confusion as the convoy tries to maneuver. Black puffs of early flak bloom in the air, but they're too high, set for bombers that never came down to this killing altitude before. "Okay, boys," Holland calls into the interphone. "This is what Pappy Guns Wrenches built these monsters for. We're going in hot." He pushes the throttles forward. The engine's thunder deepens. The nose drops slightly as he aims at a transport already trailing smoke from the Beaufighter strafing run. "Gunner, take out their bridge and guns. We'll tuck a present under their ribs after." In the nose, Sergeant Leo Martinez grips the twin 50s. As the ship swells in his sight, he can make out individual figures scrambling to man damaged guns, some still stunned from the earlier attack. "Firing," Martinez yells. The Brownings erupt. Tracer lashes the transport's bridge, shredding windows, men, and instruments. Immaculate uniforms and navigation charts vanish in a fog of splinters and blood. An AA mount amidships explodes as its ready ammunition cooks off under the hammering fire. For the Japanese, the shock is almost surreal. "These are bombers?" one sailor shouts, ducking as rounds tear through the air overhead. "How can bombers do this?" They never thought of bombers as predators of the sea. That was the role of torpedo planes in submarines. Yet these B-25s, laden with guns and flying at mast height,
behave like single-minded assassins. Stand by, Ortega calls, watching the transport's flank in the makeshift bomb site. The sea flashes up. The ship's hull looms, pocked by earlier hits. Now, the bombs tumble free, bounce across the waves, and slam into the transport just above the waterline. Delayed fuses ensure the explosion happens inside the hull. An instant later, the ship bulges grotesquely, then splits, vomiting flame and metal into the air. Men are flung from the deck like rag dolls. All along the convoy, other B-25s repeat the deadly dance. Strafing runs to blind and suppress gunners, followed by precision skip bombing to gut the ships. Japanese destroyers, their captains cursing, try to interpose themselves, throwing up walls of tracer and maneuvering to dodge the incoming attacks. In one Mitchell, a burst of 25mm flak punches through the right wing, spraying the interior with shrapnel. A waist gunner cries out, clutching a crimson-soaked leg. The plane shudders but holds course, the pilot refusing to break off until his bombs are away. This is the brutal calculus of the Southwest Pacific Air War. Low-level attacks mean high risk, but also devastating effect. For the American crews, there is no illusion of safety in altitude, only the raw, intimate violence of close-range combat, where you can see the enemy's faces and smell the cordite. In a convoy command room far away, Japanese officers will soon stare at casualty lists and loss reports that read like disaster manifestos. But on these decks, under the slow sky, the lesson is immediate and searing. The Americans have turned their medium bombers into ship killers. The ocean, once a highway for Imperial reinforcements, is becoming a graveyard. Back in the cockpit, Dutch Holland pulls hard on the yoke, skimming over the dying transport as a column of smoke erupts behind him.
"That's one less heading for Ley," Ortega says, voice tight. "Plenty more to go," Holland replies, banking toward his next target, as the .50s cool just long enough to be reloaded. The reports land on Japanese desks like hammer blows. From Rabaul's fortress headquarters, meticulously written dispatches detail the November raids. Ships gutted by bombs that skipped upon the water. Anti-aircraft crews massacred before they could lay proper fire. Medium bombers behaving like heavily armed attack planes. From New Guinea's battered coastal bases, radio traffic describes convoys broken apart not by high-altitude saturation, but by low-flying gunships that tear through formations at suicidal distances. At a staff conference in Rabaul, senior officers of the Imperial Japanese Navy and Army spread reconnaissance photos across a table. Blackened hulks tilt in Simpson Harbor, their outlines warped by explosion and fire. One photo shows a B-25 streaking low over the water, nose bristling with guns, white wake flashing beneath it. A naval air commander, Captain Ishikawa, tops the image with a gloved finger. "They have converted their medium bombers into attack aircraft," he says, voice bleak. "Look at the gun ports in the nose. At least 8, maybe more. These are not the same machines that raided us in 1942. Across from him, an Army officer frowns. "They are still slow. They will die to fighters." "Perhaps," Ishikawa replies. "But they fly so low that our early warning is useless. By the time we scramble zeros, they are already in the harbor, already killing ships." The change forces a reckoning. Japanese doctrine, steeped in pre-war assumptions, has not anticipated this breed of bomber. The guns on their warships are trained for traditional threats, high bombers, torpedo planes on oblique approaches, not medium bombers racing in at mast height, guns blazing like heavy fighters. In Simpson Harbor, Sergeant Matsuda, the ridge observer, now stands over a rough grave, cap in hand. Buried beneath the volcanic soil are several of his comrades, men killed when a single B-25 strafing run turned their gun pit into a slaughterhouse.
His own ears still ring from the roar of those American engines, from the almost physical impact of 50 caliber rounds slamming into earth and flesh. "They came so low," he murmurs to a fellow survivor. "I could see the pilot's goggles. How do you shoot at a man that close with a gun meant for high bombers?" His companion shrugs, eyes hollow. "We learn, or we die." They will try to learn. Orders go out to reposition anti-aircraft guns closer to the shoreline, to train gun crews in rapid depression and elevation changes, to coordinate fighter patrols at multiple altitudes. Zeros are instructed to fly more low-level sweeps, to pounce on incoming formations before they can begin their runs. But every adjustment comes at a cost. Zeros flying low burn more fuel and have less advantage against enemy fighters.
AA guns brought closer to the waterline become more vulnerable to the very strafing they're meant to counter. In the evolving chess game of the Southwest Pacific, the Americans have just made a bold, unexpected move, and the Japanese are scrambling to respond with pieces already worn thin by constant combat. Meanwhile, in dusty, improvised workshops in Townsville and other Australian bases, U.S. ground crews and engineers refined their deadly experiment. Under the watchful eye of Major Paul "Pappy" Gunn, a civilian airline engineer turned maverick officer, torches cut through B-25 noses. Glass panels come off, replaced by solid metal and mounting points for rows of Brownings. Side packs of guns sprout like tumors from the fuselage. Internally, wiring is rerouted, triggers combined, and ammo boxes crammed into every available corner. Gunn, sleeves rolled up, surveys a newly modified Mitchell, its nose now a blunt, perforated hammerhead.
"Every one of those barrels means one less Jap ship bringing supplies to New Guinea," he says to a skeptical ordnance officer. "You want them dead? This is how we do it." The officer runs a hand along the metal. And the crews? Gunn's eyes narrow. They know the risks, but they also know the odds got better when we started fighting at the only altitude where this war's decided, down in the mud and the spray. For the crews, the transformation is both terrifying and empowering. They are no longer just bomb bus drivers. They are assault pilots, tasked with missions that feel more like knife fights than bombardments. In ready rooms, men trade tips on how to line up a strafing run, how to feel the right release moment for a skip bomb, how to time the breakaway before their own bomb blast can rip the tail off their plane. "Don't stare at the target too long," one veteran tells a new pilot. "You'll want to ride it in, but you gotta pull when your gut says so."
If you're still thinking about it, you're dead. In Japanese briefings, the phrase "commerce destroyers" begins to circulate, first as a grim joke among fighter pilots, then as a grudging acknowledgement of a new threat. They watch American film reels, captured or leaked, showing B-25s chewing up ships and airfields. Some dismiss it as propaganda, insisting such low-level tactics are reckless and unsustainable. Yet the evidence piles up. Convoys shattered in the Bismarck Sea, harbors turned into scrapyards, airfields cratered and aircraft shredded on the ground. Each new disaster report reinforces a single, inescapable fact. The Americans have found a way to turn their medium bombers into weapons perfectly tuned to the geography and realities of the Southwest Pacific.
Back in a B-25 cockpit, somewhere over the steaming jungles of New Guinea, Major Macaulay looks down at a lifeless stretch of coastline where weeks before, Japanese barges had crept along at night, seeking to slip supplies past Allied air power. "Nothing moving down there now," Harkins notes, scanning the shoreline. "Not for lack of trying," Macaulay replies. "They'll keep coming. We'll keep hunting." Below them, twisted metal lies half-submerged in surf, remnants of barges, small craft, and once proud ships that never made it to their destinations. Each piece of wreckage tells the same story, of bombers that stopped being just bombers, of men who flew low enough to look their enemy in the eyes, and of an air war that evolved in brutal, improvisational leaps. In time, the lessons learned here about concentrated forward firepower, low-level attack, and multi-role aircraft will echo in designs and doctrines worldwide.
But in 1943 and 1944, over Rabaul's harbor and New Guinea's shipping lanes, those lessons are paid for in blood, flak scars, and the howl of engines knifing through spray. For the Japanese sailors who watched bombers turn into gunships and tear their convoys apart, the memory will be as sharp as shrapnel. The roar at mast height, the blaze of tracers, the impossible sight of heavy aircraft coming straight at them like charging beasts. And for the men in the B-25s, it will be the feel of the yoke bucking in their hands, the smell of cordite and hot metal, and the knowledge that in this theater, survival lies not in altitude, but in aggression.